name of his novel is The Plot Against Hip Hop. Thank you so much for joining me.
Really a pleasure to be here.
Is this the first time that you've been at the Miami Book Fair?
It is actually. It's been quite a really great experience. I'd heard of it, but I had no idea that it was as large, as comprehensive as it is. It's really been fun.
Yeah, it actually is it's pretty huge. And you're going to be reading today, I think, at 1:30, right?
Absolutely, with a couple of other writers like this. I guess they're all in the sort of mystery genre thing. I assume we're going to read a little bit and talk.
Have you met them before? Is this your first time meeting?
Yeah, I don't know these guys, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah,
You know,
sounds like it should be. The name of the book again, The Plot Against Hip Hop, and you have written about hip hop culture before, am I right?
I mean, I'm one of the first writers to really write about it, going back to when I was in college in New York City in the late '70s. I remember I wrote about Cool Herc, a party was Cool Herc, who was one of the founders, and I think it's probably one of the one or two first published pieces about what we now call hip hop. And I wrote considerably about hip hop in the '80s. I was at Billboard magazine as an editor. I also wrote for the Village Voice and other music publications, and I've done a couple of books related directly to hip hop, which was the Hip Hop America in the late '90s, which was a history of hip hop up to that point, and I also collaborated with Russell Simmons on his first autobiography. So I've written quite a bit. I work on a TV show called Hip Hop Honors on VH1. That's an annual hip hop celebration. So this has been one of the main kind of threads of my life.
And from the 70s until now, how has it evolved? We're going to talk about your novel, but I want to get a good background on the hip hop culture. How has it evolved since the 70s to now?
Well, I mean, it's evolved through about five or six, maybe seven different phases. It's not one thing. I mean, people tend to use the phrase the hip hop generation, but in truth, we're talking about people like myself who were, uh, teenagers, young adults in the '70s, early '80s when it began to really evolve as a mass thing. We're talking about people who grew up, on Run DMC and KRS One. That's another group. Then you have the '90s group that's West Coast, like Snoop Dogg, and then you also have people like De La Soul, and then you have this group that comes up now that grew up on Jay Z and 50 Cent, and also now embrace Drake, Lil Wayne, Nicki Minaj. So it's gone through a lot of permutations. There's not one. The biggest thing to say is that hip hop has expanded from a folk art essentially in the streets of New York into a global cultural force, which you can go to Brazil, you can go to China, you can go to Barcelona, you can go to Senegal, and you will find people who are rapping, who are breakdancing or breaking, doing graffiti art, DJing, do scratching. I mean, all of these different ways the culture has become a central part of the global youth experience.
And when it started, and you were there at the beginning, I'll just say you were there at the beginning, was the expectation at that time this is something that's going to just span the globe, or was it just did people expect it to last as long as it has? Because during the disco age, it kind of came and went, thank God. But with hip hop, it is evolved, it's grown, it's spread across the globe. Was that an expectation, do you think?
I don't think so. I think most people were thinking about this is something I can do that sets me apart.
Mm-hmm.
It's an expression that my peers like, and that maybe I can make some kind of money off of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even when the first rap record came out, we're talking about Rapper's Delight. The expectation among many people who were in it was, "Oh God, that's it. We've had one rap record. No one's gonna want anything else." So, I mean, literally, they were like, "Oh my God, there's gonna be one, and that's it." So there was not really a lot of long-term expectation for it. I would say that a key person in this journey is Russell Simmons,
Mm-hmm.
and that Russell was a child, a product of this culture, who also had an interest in business, and he really saw it as youth culture. He saw it as something that could reach outside of just the black community and really reach into white America and other communities. Um, so he was one of the people who really pushed it from a business point of view and a promotional point of view. It was crucial that he existed because the people who were kind of around it at first, like the Sugar Hill Gang rap people, didn't understand it as a culture. They just saw it as a novelty record.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a bigger vision of it. And I think that's one reason why it succeeded. That when you say hip hop, you're also saying a style of a sound of music. You're saying a style of dance. You're saying a style of dress. You're
Right.
saying slang. In other words, you're embracing a very many tentacles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one reason it's been able to survive and evolve. It's not just a record; it's all these other things. And so, for a young person, you could dive into hip hop. You could become part of it in a number of different ways.
Ah, let's talk about your novel. Is this the first novel that you've written around hip hop?
Um, yeah, actually, it's. I've written other novels, but it's funny. I think this may be one of the first novels that is really hip hop. Is the text and subtext.
Mm-hmm.
I say to say there's a lot of urban street lit that references hip hop and
Mm-hmm.
uses it, but this book is about from the chapter titles to the cover. It's about the evolution of the culture through the narrative of a murder investigation. Um, so I feel like it's about hip hop and about the direction and spiritual dimensions of hip hop in a way that no other book has been to date.
Tell us about D. Hunter.
Well, D Hunter is that character. If you see any picture of any celebrity or on TMZ or in People magazine, there's usually or often there's a big black man, in a suit or in a T-shirt hovering on the edge of the frame. He's that guy who's there to protect the celebrity from the world. And so D Hunter is that guy. But we go inside him, and who is this man who sees everything, who hears everything but says nothing? He aside from he also one thing that complicates him is that he's HIV positive. He's got the virus. So even though he's a huge guy and can be very intimidating, he's also very vulnerable and has a weakness that he's very aware of. Um, so I wanted to create the idea of this super, this stereotypical in a sense huge black intimidating man, but then you go inside him and find his vulnerability, his softness, and his desire for justice. When his friend Dwayne Robinson, a well-known music writer, is murdered, he doesn't accept the police investigation that it's just a gang initiation. He knows his friend was writing a book called The Plot Against Hip Hop, and he begins to see a connection between that particular text and Dwayne's demise, and that leads him on a journey kind of backwards through the history of hip hop.
Now, there's the subject of the Illuminati and all of these secret societies. You kind of weave that in there too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to. This generation is really aware of the Illuminati and these ideas about outside forces controlling hip hop. But there's also the dimension I wanted to bring in COINTELPRO. In fact, there's a character who runs a website called Hip Hop COINTELPRO. And COINTELPRO was a thing the FBI did in the 60s and 70s to subvert and divert the direction of black nationalism in the United States. And I wanted to access that historical memory uh, and to use all of these different conspiracies that have affected black people and make that part of the conversation. That if what is going on with black America, how has this energy been diverted in hip hop? Why is it not as political as it used to be? And provide some answers. It may not be the absolute correct answer, but within the frame of the story, it gives us a chance to look at the options, look at the world around. So I mean, for me, writing The Plot Against Hip Hop was a chance to explore hip hop history and also black history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So young people that will pick up this book and read this, you want them to understand what?
I want them to get a sense of the connectivity between uh, the civil rights struggle and ideas about black empowerment and what hip hop used to represent. I mean, the biggest disconnect is that someone like myself, who grew up in the Run DMC era and is from the era, we're very disconnected from hip hop now. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to tell the story from the point of view of an adult who loves this music, loves his culture, but now feels it's not his own anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, he's still benefiting from what hip hop is. He runs a business. He does bodyguard work for big rap celebrities. So he's in that interesting spot where he doesn't necessarily like what it is now, but he's still exploiting it in a sense for his own well-being. And that's the position of a lot of people involving hip hop. They have great affection for what it was, but now it's just a business to them. It's not a culture. And I think I wanted to capture that character.
Is that part of the conversation that goes on now between there are these resentments between certain artists the old school versus the new kids on the block. Is that part of what you're talking about here?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the point of view of the novel is the point of view of a lot of people who you run into. I mean, from Melly Mel to some of the old school writers to people who grew up on the culture. There's definitely a generational disconnect
Mm-hmm.
between the more conscious or more culturally based people and those who just use hip hop now as a platform
Mm-hmm.
to make marketing deals. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
half of the young MCs today, it's not about selling records, it's about getting an endorsement deal for a cosmetics company or a clothing company or a liquor company.
Mm-hmm.
And so hip hop as a culture is not, they don't have the same love for it because it's just a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And really that's some of the ideas that the plot against hip hop deals with.
And the name of the book is The Plot Against Hip Hop, a novel by Nelson George. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful time. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you so